President Trump today escalated and expanded his trade war with the world.
He announced he is placing a tariff this Saturday on imports from every nation on the planet, at least 10%.
He called that a baseline. Some countries will get hit much harder. China, 54%. European countries, 20%.
The president said U.S. taxpayers had been ripped off by other countries for more than 50 years. But he said it's not going to happen anymore.
But Americans could pay a price for the tariffs in the form of higher costs for consumer goods.
Nancy Cordes at the White House begins our coverage of what the president calls Liberation Day, a day he said will go down in history. Nancy?
John, it certainly is a day that could end up altering the world's economy. U.S. tariffs on some countries are going to soar overnight from the single digits to up to 50%, the largest expansion of tariffs since at least the 1930s.
This is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time.
President Trump laid out the numbers just after the U.S. stock markets had closed. The new 10% baseline tariffs on all goods coming into the U.S. and even higher tariffs on goods from 60 countries that the White House dubbed the worst offenders, countries that export more to the U.S. than we export to them.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike.
He held up a chart indicating the U.S. will now be imposing dramatically larger 54% tariffs on Chinese goods, 24% on Japanese goods, and 20% on European goods.
You know, you think of the European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic.
White House officials predict the new tariffs will bring in up to $700 billion a year in new government revenue, enabling them to reduce income taxes and pay down the national debt. But many economic forecasters and the president's critics say the revenue will be far lower, and they warn that tariffs will drive up the price of goods here in the U.S.
It's essentially a sales tax. The sales tax is the most regressive tax there is. It hits lower-income people the hardest.
The Senate is voting tonight on a bill introduced by Virginia Democrat Tim Kaine. It would roll back the tariffs Trump imposed on Canada last month. Several Republicans have already signed on, including the former Senate leader, Mitch McConnell. The president seems very certain that these reciprocal taxes are going to be beneficial in the long run to American businesses and the American economy.
Wall Street Journal says it will be the dumbest trade war in American history. Economists left, right, and center think it's a bad idea.
Nancy, this is a huge bet. And as you said there, he spoke with a lot of certainty on this. Why is the president so certain this is going to work?
Maurice, because this president has been passionate about the idea of tariffs for decades, since way before he even entered public office. He believes that this is the only way to convince U.S. companies to bring manufacturing back here to the U.S. where they won't face those tariffs. But it is an unproven theory, and a lot of critics argue that for every job that's created, there could be far more that are lost if these tariffs spark a global economic slowdown.
Nancy, was there any pushback from the president's advisors, any debate about this?
His advisors, even those who haven't always been fans of tariffs, they knew that this was going to be part of the deal. So they have gotten on board. They've made it clear, though, John, that they presented him with a menu of options. He's the one who made the final decision.
Okay, Nancy Cordes, thank you.
Now for the reaction, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is warning against retaliation. Elizabeth Palmer is in London.
But first, Jason Allen is in Laredo, Texas, where companies were already moving goods in from Mexico to try to beat the price hikes they're expecting. Jason.
Yeah, Maurice, some of the importers who I just talked to are feeling a little bit of relief with this news from the White House, knowing that many products from Mexico will now remain exempt from these new tariffs. But all of the uncertainty created 3-mile-long lines of trucks here at the border as companies tried to rush products into the U.S.
This looks different from when we were here last.
Totally different. So last time you were here, they hadn't started running for the border yet.
We first walked through Rick Laurel's warehouse in February. Since then, companies have filled his building and others in Laredo, Texas, with car parts, cosmetics, construction equipment, and other products from Mexico.
Is some of that reaction based on what we saw happen when tariffs were in place for a couple of days?
I have a customer that paid $98,000 extra those 2 days.
So that's $98,000 for 2 days that customer is probably going to have to try to pass on to his customers.
Yeah, they're in a predicament.
Mexico is the United States' top trading partner, with more than $800 billion worth of goods traded back and forth in 2023.
We just want to convey the amount of stress that we're under.
We were inside a meeting Wednesday between U.S. Customs and Border Protection and importers who were pushing for guidance on how to handle new charges.
Is that what you think companies are going to be figuring out over the next few days, is who takes the biggest hit?
I don't think one person is just going to take the hit. I think it's universal. The whole supply chain, that one way or another, does get hit.
Inside Librado Pina's 38-degree cold storage warehouse, avocados and mangoes are stacked to the ceiling.
Or do you think there's still going to be questions about, is this the end? Does it all change again in a few days or a few weeks or another month?
Everybody's looking for stability right now. I don't think people care, is it 5%, is it 10%? I just want it to be, it is what it is, it's stable, so we can plan accordingly, and at the end of the day, it comes down to cost.
I'm Elizabeth Palmer in London. The European Union sells the U.S. everything from German cars to Swiss watches and Italian cheese. And even before President Trump's announcement, it was already talking tough.
Europe has not started this confrontation. We do not necessarily want to retaliate. But if it is necessary, we have a strong plan to retaliate, and we will use it.
That's a threat. To impose counter tariffs on U.S. products coming into Europe, which would make them more expensive and damage sales. But the danger is that tit-for-tat tariffs escalate and hurt everyone. So in the UK, at least, Prime Minister Keir Starmer was pulling his punches.
A trade war is in nobody's interest. We will take a calm, pragmatic approach.
That approach is to hope for private talks with President Trump, leading to a sweetheart deal for the UK when the dust settles. Among the Asian powerhouses, the tariff threat has made old U.S. allies like Japan and South Korea look to America's great rival, China. These ministers were discussing how to sell more to each other in case tariffs shut them out of the U.S. market. India was braced, too, fearing for its pharmaceutical industry. Generic medicines currently account for 9 out of 10 prescriptions in the United States, and half come from India. These tariffs could leave Americans paying a lot more for their drugs. Now, it's the middle of the night here in Europe, so we haven't seen a lot of public reaction yet. The little we have seen is negative, as you may expect. The Italian Prime Minister has called these tariffs just wrong, and Ireland's Premier has spoken up and saying there's no justification for them. But you know that this trickle of criticism will have become a full-bore deluge by tomorrow.